Te Hui o Te Wellington Regional Wellington Waste and Minimisation Plan Joint Committee tēnei rā. If you'd like to join in with me with the karakia, that would be lovely. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Right, well, lovely to see everyone today, thank you, and I hope you had a wonderful Wellington Region weekend. It was pretty spectacular. Right, do we have any apologies today? Oh, Councillor Helena is an apology. Is Councillor Duffy online? Yes, oh. Lovely to see you, Quentin. Thank you. And 5 of us elected members. Yep. So that's good. So we'll meet the quorum. Councillor Mitchell, would you second that apology? Okay, all those in favour? Aye. Okay, so kuamana, that's carried. Conflict of interest declarations, any to declare? Okay, no, and now just moving the motion that we accept the minutes from the committee meeting of the 2nd of December. I'll move it. For your second, thank you, Councillor Hayward. All those in favour? Aye. Okay, cool, mana. Thank you very much. Now, I have got the letter for politicians, but it's not a proper paper, so we'll just do it after the meeting's closed. So no items not on the agenda, no request for public participation. So we'll just go straight to officers. Welcome, thank you very much. Just if you've got any extra comments that you want to make, everyone's read the paper, so we don't need a presentation, and then we will get into questions. I thought we'd do 3 questions each, and then we'll go on for a second round if that's necessary. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, I'm assuming that you have read the paper, so happy to take any questions from here. And we've got Lisa and Yvette as the key authors, and David and I as the co-chairs of the Waste Managers Steering Group.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Right, who would like to go first? And you've got my questions. Councillor Hayward, you go.
Kia ora koutou, kia ora kaimahi. Thank you for the report. I want to go to point 44 on the progress update with regards to the letter. I think this has actually been addressed by the Chair in terms of what the progress will be around the letter. But in terms of the response that was received and is stated in point 43, is there any additional commentary in terms of what we know from central government in terms of the role of local government in consultation with any proposed changes?
My understanding is we haven't had any further information on public consultation and what the intentions are. We know that the government is working on something, but there hasn't been any further communication on it.
Okay. Point 50, I'll go to my next question.
Yep, go.
So in point 50, it talks about the issue that with MFE's restraint being directed to them around the data reporting. There's some commentary here around investigation from the local councils themselves. Are there any timeframes under which that scan is going to happen, and what will be the result of that in terms of being reporting back to councils?
There isn't. Just in response to that question, so there isn't any specific time frames now that the government has confirmed that there won't be anything new in that space. I guess we're going back to a situation that we were in about 4 or 5 years ago when we were looking at a licensing scheme. Now, 2 councils have actually implemented licensing. Kapiti's had that for a while, and Wellington has implemented a more simple approach that actually is going to be talked about later on. Other councils don't have that yet. Now, the question is, how do councils respond to that? And that's yet to be confirmed. Will be interesting to see that presentation from Wellington later on, but it's fair to say that licensing itself and requesting the data doesn't necessarily mean you get a whole lot more useful data out of it. So there's a question of what's the value of pushing down that path, because we did go down the path for quite a long way. And you may recall from previous updates, we were actually working with the Waikato region at the time to potentially do something jointly. In the end, at least looking at my own council, we decided that from an officer point of view, it just wasn't enough value to spend $500,000 on licensing rollout and then not actually getting enough data out of it. We can reevaluate this and look at it going forward, but the time frame's not clear yet in terms of when that might happen.
I might withhold any supplementary questions with regards to that topic until after the presentation, but if I can use my third question now just to move on to the project planning around organic waste management. There's a point in here with regards to the MFE grant, which will meet some of the costs for both Wellington and Hutt City. Is it possible at this stage to estimate what the percentage of the grant will cover in terms of the cost of rollout? I want to get that on in my mind, because obviously Porirua City, I have a particular view as a councillor around that table as to what a grant would mean in terms of reducing the burden on ratepayers and joining the other two councils with the rollout as well.
And to answer that question, I think there's two components to this. One is the rollout costs in terms of bin infrastructure and project management and things like campaigns to update and make sure that residents are aware of the service being rolled out. So looking at that cost, when we made the funding application at the time between the three councils, including Porirua, we looked at not just the bin cost, but also the associated costs like project management. And the cost that MFE would be covering would be about 75% based on that initial estimate. Now, the actual costs might differ in the end a little bit, but 75 is what we're working with. So that 75% is a different absolute number for the different councils depending on how many residential properties they have, right? When it comes to the processing facility, so if you include that cost, then obviously the rollout cost would be significantly larger, and we don't have a good estimate of how much that it's going to be. In the business case, we assumed it could be up to 75 million to build a facility, and some of that part could be part funded from MFE if there was funding forthcoming. But the actual costs of that won't be confirmed until we've gone through the procurement process, which would be the stage 4 that we're currently looking at, and the timing for that is to be confirmed. If it's 10 million or 20 million, then obviously it would be a lot. The bin rollout cost would be a significantly smaller, a larger share of the total compared to a big processing facility being like 75 million. So given we don't know the cost, I can't really answer the question in terms of what the share is or the percentage, but it gives you an indication of where that might land.
I appreciate your candor on this. I might come back to this at subsequent meetings because it will be a hot issue, I suspect, in terms of meeting the costs of diversion of organic waste and figuring the best way to deal with that.
And maybe just one follow-up, if that's okay. There are kind of two models in terms of implementing a processing solution. One is councils go in and co-fund one, and then co-own the facility, or you could also go down essentially a gate fee model where you say, like we do with the processing facility at OG, at least some of us, where we just pay them to process a material on per tonne basis, and that's the cost. Now, with a processing solution, we may have a private party building a facility, and then all they do is charge councils a gate fee to process that material. Now, councils will pay for CapEx, whether they like it or not, if we go down this path. Whether it's council's own CapEx, or whether we are paying for the CapEx that the private sector has put into it. Now, when you look at the gate fee model, then you wouldn't actually have any direct CapEx component in it. So when you look at the total project cost, it might just be the bin rollout cost, and then everything else is the operational cost that you're looking at from, say, 2027, 2028 onwards. And depending on the estimates, we're looking at sort of I think it was between $100 and $180 per household to cover that full cost. So coming back to your original question, how much is the bin share of the total? Well, it could be that could be the total share, and everything else is operationalized. and then is recovered through, for example, a targeted rate. That's still to be decided.
I appreciate that, and yes, I knew that was still an issue in play. Just to foreshadow in terms of the line of questioning is that, you know, it's not merely just about the cost of ratepayers, it's also about what is going to be able to get effective return on reducing organic waste landing up in landfill, and which option is going to be, you know, balanced against that. That's work you guys are already doing, I know that, so I'll leave it there.
Okay, and you'll go back on the list, presumably. Yep. Okay, who'd like to go next? Expect to see lots of questions. Councillor Mitchell, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go with one to begin with. My biggest concern in reading these papers was a couple of councils who indicated that the work on curbside food scrap collection and curbside recycling was on hold. And I was just wondering if, and I think it was Kapiti and Upper Hutt, if we could have some more detail about what on hold means. Has that been a political decision not to progress that work any further, or is there nothing operationally happening at the moment? What that work actually, what that means?
Do you want to answer that yourself? Yeah, I did have a question about that too. Sounds helpful.
Okay.
When we say on hold, we're just not delivering at the moment, that's all. There's work being done in this space. Obviously, we were waiting for what the direction from central government was going to be. We're already putting a lot of things in place up in Kapiti. The introduction of the curbside stuff will be more than likely something that's heading towards the re-signing of the contracts, if that goes down that way. But I'm comfortable that Robbie's doing work in that space as we move forward. So it's not on hold as in there's nothing being done there. It's on hold in regards to it's being explored what pathway we're going to go down. Since we're not being forced down a certain pathway, we've now got to look at what we want to do with regards to addressing that issue. It's a very live issue in our community. It's something that we want to see addressed. It's just how do we go about doing that within the constraints that we've got.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? It says in the report that KCDC is waiting on legislative change, but I understood that that mandate around organics was never a legislative change. It's whether it's the WMA that's actually reformed. So are we even able to correct that if you are doing the work and it's not on hold strictly?
Well, it's not on hold strictly.
Because it's good to be able to reflect the progress you're making.
Yeah, I again support council officers with regards to where they want to. I guess it's not at the stage of wanting to present something to the table as such. We're a little bit away from doing that. So, you know, it's just not, should we say, putting it in the public arena at this stage. And sorry, another comment I would just throw in there as well, with regards to what's just been talked about the we also need a place for the stuff to go. Which, you know, that's part of the regional grouping of Hutt and Wellington with regards to what are the solutions for this. You know, we start collecting this. Where's it going? And that's part of the issue there as well.
Lovely to have you as a partner, Martin. You don't have to be a client.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the updated policies, the confirmation that the curbside food scrap mandate was cancelled in December, so that wasn't that long ago. We do have alternate plans. We do have good relationships and a licensing system that's working quite well. But as to what we do in lieu of, you know, the government mandates, there was some talk about whether they replace that with something. So that's why it's worded the way it is. If they bring in something new, we'll look to comply with that. In the meantime, you know, we keep licensing, keep working with the collectors. But then also the other big question is what is the facility? Is, you know, the regional organics project, will that be something that Kapiti can tie into? There's other options, other places. So we are actively looking at work in the space, but not looking at a council-led contract at this stage, which was supported by the removal of the mandates in December last year.
So given we'd made some commitments to reduce our waste by 2026-27, how are you going to make progress?
Yeah, organics actually on the report's 2030. That's still 5 years away.
Yeah.
So, yep, there's with regards to minimising, we're doing that in other areas as well. So I'm pretty happy with where we're heading in that.
Kapiti does have the opportunity for pulling off a decentralised model to a certain extent. Like, for example, Paikakariki is serviced by Pi-cycle, similar to Kai-cycle here on e-bikes. So we actually have that opportunity where a significant chunk of some communities are serviced in a way that wouldn't apply to bigger places like Wellington. So I think we've got 5 smallish scale community composters doing household food scraps at the moment. So for our baseline, we are pretty happy with that, but obviously looking at what happens in the space and what we can do.
So how many households in Kapiti?
23,000 odd.
23,000, and those 5 providers can have, presumably their capacity is quite limited.
A small scale, sort of local neighbourhood based. Paikakariki is nice and sort of isolated, so that's an easy community to service. They're all licensed, we all sort of know what they're up to, and a few have applied for expansion in the last round of grants. Again, it is relatively small scale, but we are working with those local community composters to expand a little bit. It actually gave them the certainty, pulling these mandates in December last year. There was always the threat that a council-led contract would push those people out if we then had one collector, one waste company. So it's given our community a bit of certainty in the meantime that they can actually carry on doing their thing, and we can support them to expand to a certain degree. Ideally coupled with a facility opening in the very near future that then our waste collectors can use, and then we do bring in that more sort of standard curbside food scrap collections. So we've got a lot of options. It's not very straightforward. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but keeping our options open, and there's a lot happening in the space.
Sorry, just last question for me for now, though Aotearoa is a laggard in this space, so we all need to kind of get moving. So is there kind of a pathway to, because 5 years isn't that long?
Yeah, we know that. Don't need to be reminded.
Yeah, okay. It's just that
I know
when
that.
we look at our progress,
I've just said we hear you.
Yep.
We don't need to be reminded, otherwise we start poking sticks at other people about the things they're not doing as well. So just be a little bit careful about what you're questioning and the style of questioning. The reason I bring this up, a throwaway comment you made in the last meeting around the catering that was done at our root forum put us in all sorts of strife. So just be wary about what you are asking and how you are asking it. Which, if I could ask for that consideration, would be much appreciated.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm also just aware that we have been working on these plans for a number of years, and that includes Wellington City Council. We really want to go hard. Helen, if you'd just like to address what you are doing in this space, that would be helpful too.
We're very similar to KCDC in the sense that when the cancellation in December came from the Ministry for the Environment, it certainly made us do a pregnant pause. We had applied to MFE for the bin rollout, which we were granted, and we're in the process of asking them whether there is a time frame. I know there are some fishhooks around that funding as to when it needs to be drawn down, so we're looking at whether they would postpone it. We had a workshop on Tuesday with regard to waste minimisation and where we land in our community, so we will be going out to consult on curbside recycling and organics when in March, I think the 4th, in the 12th of March, I think we rubber stamp our consultation document, which will have curbside recycling in there. It's just a matter of, if it's not mandated, then it will all be on the rates that we need to put in there, and we're all cognizant around this table as to the rates hit with other things that are coming down, that it's not just waste minimisation or organics, it's everything else that is coming at us from central government. So whilst we've put it on hold, it means it's on hold. The governance side of people did a workshop on it. We will see in 7 days' time the officers come back to us. The community then will signal to us where they want to go with that. When 640,000 K equates to 1% rates increase, and we know what the cost of curbside, particularly organic, is going to do, because we're only 16,000 rateable houses in Upper Hutt. Half of us are rural and half of us are urban, that it is a bigger conversation that we need to have. Being legislated by central government certainly would have made our pathway a lot clearer, and we were happy to actually continue that, but there are other influences that are playing out on the governance seat as to the decision. We had Will Hanson do a pilot that we supported through the waste minimisation, which was taking all our food organics. It's just a pity that the guy is great with ideals, but very low on his ability to give us a business case, so we still have yet to see that. We do have local people like Ron Vink, who does collect organics from around, I'm not quite sure, I can't recall how many houses he collects from, but he does collect. So we are working with siloed people in the community who are looking at picking up Kai waste and repurposing that in, composting and things like that. So I can't give you a definitive answer. I would certainly be at the council, our council table advocating, but unless you're really good at it, you're only one voice out of 11.
Of course, and we know that the rates are the trick.
Yep.
Just a couple of questions.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a cost of not taking action too,
Yes.
right? So we need to develop more landfill space. It's not, sometimes people kind of go, it's either we do nothing or we do this expensive collection.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is that in the paper? I mean, the idea was that these collections were supposed to be rate funded. We were moving, we went from user pays, even though in theory it should have worked. So that is one of the options.
Okay.
And is the consultation document clear that the alternative is that Hutt needs to build a bigger landfill?
So with our particular consultation, it is looking at that, and we would, we're very cognizant of what Hutt City Council are doing because we use the Silverstream landfill. We're waiting to see what's going to happen at Manor Park. But also there are a lot of timelines that are discussed around this table that are very loosey-goosey, and it would be really good if I was to go back to my table with definitive timelines as what Jeff is asking so that we can put it in our LTP, because we struck our LTP at 19.35 in the first year, which we're doing, with a second year of just under 20%. That isn't even factoring local water done well, or factoring in the consequences of the Waste Minimisation Act and what the MFE are doing to us. So I am cognizant that there is a cost of whether you do it and a cost if you don't, but at the end of the day, I have to rationalise that around affordability.
Yeah, and I guess this is the problem for all of us, because we have to, if we always use that argument, we'll never get to where we get to, right? So there's quite a lot made of, just speaking from our end, there's quite a lot made of Wellington City Council's uncertainty. That's because some hard politics were played around an airport sale. It had nothing to do with the waste. I'm confident that that money will go through. So, we should be planning on that basis, and we are absolutely committed to getting the organic processing plant done with Hutt is the ideal. And then, but if that falls through, we will do something else, and obviously some regional collaboration would be a good thing. Andy, do you want to just talk now? Sorry, this is all a bit informal, but it's actually quite useful. Do you feel that your budgets are reasonably solid, given we're going to go through that process?
We're in the same boat as everybody else, I guess, in terms of the government no longer requiring it of us, which in our long-term plan consultation was part of our position on it. So it's a decision now that has to be taken for other reasons. We have to find other compelling reasons to do it. And I think our next big decision point doesn't come till after the election, so it potentially is an election issue now. I just think for me, and the reason I asked that question, I certainly wasn't pointing sticks, is that for all of us, there's a new government. We set targets for this WMMP. It's a 6-year plan. It always had the potential to transcend governments, different governments, and that's what's happened. The new governments come in and change their priorities. However, we all committed to goals for the 6-year period, which either we remain committed to or we, throw our hands in the air and say, well, if the government doesn't want us to do this anymore, we won't do it anymore. And I think that's a really important thing to drive our conversations, particularly if it is this year in an annual plan or a long-term plan, and keeping funding in there that we put in there to meet our targets, not just because the government told us we had to do these things, but in order to meet our targets. And I just think of it a little bit in parallel with the way the government runs their carbon reduction budgets, that governments are bound to the targets how they go about getting to the targets is at the discretion of a particular government. So I guess a question for all of us, if not this, then how will we meet our targets that we set ourselves in our WMMP and we committed to? If we're not following through on these particular actions, how will we do it? So if councils are looking at other options of how to, deal with food scraps, great. At least we're kind of still, got our eyes on the target, I think. And that's not just for us as decision makers, but for our residents to understand that as well, that we actually are working to our own targets of reducing waste to landfill. And that's why we need to spend money on particular things at particular times.
So you've got a budget, though, this year. Will that likely go through with the money in it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So that's at least helpful. And then, Jeff, you may have a bit of a...
It's similar to actually what was just mentioned in that while there is, we also go through an annual plan process, the consultation does not incorporate and does not propose to make any changes to our current arrangements, our current trajectory with regards to curbside collection changes, but it is likely that it will become an election issue. So I'm going to restrain from jumping on the soapbox around that stuff here, but
that's right.
It is an issue.
That is the job of the next Waste Committee. All right. Now, who would like to next ask questions? Just before, because you're definitely on my second list, Helen, do you have any or anyone online?
I'd like to wait to after the presentation because I've got a few.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Okay, Steve, Rebecca, Quentin, do you have any questions? Okay, so I'll leave the C&D till later. The residual waste, I was just wanting some more detail about what will be reported on in the next quarter by June.
Council, this is, Chair, this is the project on the future residual waste.
Yeah.
So this project has now gotten underway. Hutt City Council is the lead on it. We're currently in a fact-finding phase, so it's basically compiling all the information that's out there. So by the time the next committee comes around, I wouldn't expect that there would be a lot to report on. It might be that we have a summary of findings at that point, but there wouldn't be anything concrete yet because we're still in this research and fact-finding phase.
So that's good, started. What about in 6 months? So by September?
Well, looking forward, so there is when we looked at the scope, going back to the scope of the project, it's quite possible that we will need some external support to help us through that project. And it may be that at that point, we're at the point where we can look at procurement of that external advice so that we can then move through the project. But initially, we do the fact-finding, then we move into, well, what do we actually need to go through this project? And we may well need external partner support for that.
Okay, so obviously this is an important piece of work, so we just want to, keep moving. Okay, thank you. My question 3 and 4 was about breakdown of work each quarter. It just was raised last time, just so that, and that's per council too. This is what we're doing from March to June, June to September, so on.
So the question is, do we have a breakdown of what work we'll be doing, what councils will be doing, and
at a regional level?
At the regional level.
Yeah.
So at the regional level, we do the major project updates. So that includes some at least high-level milestones. When it comes to the local councils, in principle, we could do this in terms of providing more information, not on just what has been done, but what will be done. But it's just worth noting here, coming back to the original reporting framework that we developed, that if we are also now looking at forward reporting, it'll just add to the admin load for pulling that work together. It's also worth noting that each council have their own reporting frameworks or styles for how they report to their individual committees. So if there is an intention for the joint committee to want a common template for all of that to happen, that still needs to be developed, and I would expect there would be some conversations that need to happen between the councils in terms of whether that works for them or not. One thing I would say is that at the moment, reporting at the regional level is against the actions, the local actions and the local action plans. I can't speak for the other councils, but for Hutt City Council, we do a report against projects. So we have a project type report, and each action might have one or more projects or business as usual activities. So changing that reporting framework for the regional level is quite different. So all I'm saying is that it can be done, but we just need to be conscious of the admin workload on the different councils, so that will need agreement from the different councils, and also whether or not that's how their individual councils want those reports at their own level, because we don't want to necessarily duplicate or create two different types of reports.
I get that. I guess just my last question for now is that when I look at our reporting, well, I did have a question about, is it possible to separate out the BAU from what is new as well? Because my concern is it looks like, oh, we're doing enviro skills, well, we've been doing that for years, so that's not really taking us forward more than what we're already doing. And I guess, I just think we need to be clear that we are making progress, and I appreciate there are other considerations and we're just one voice around each council table, but we did make some commitments, as Andy said, to try and get some stuff done.
Well, coming back to as I mentioned earlier, so we have a template that requests each council to report against the action. If you would like the business as usual activities to be split out, then effectively we would be moving towards a more project-based or activity-based reporting framework, because for some actions you might have several activities or business as usual activities or projects that go against that action, right? That's certainly what we have at the Hutt. If you are after more detail, then ultimately it will be up to the individual councils to deliver this. At a regional level, all we're doing is pulling together the reports that have been provided by the councils. And if a council only provides information on, say, one business as usual activity like enviro schools, then that's what we can report. We can't generate more information than what we have been provided. So I think that would be a question for the individual councils in terms of what they would be willing to provide.
Later. Sorry, I have got more questions. Is anyone else wanting to ask some? Do you want to ask? Yep, go for it.
Thank you. Nā tu upoko, whae upoko, aroha mai. I also want to just weigh in with reflections with regards to how we can better meet that expectation around commentary between BAU and projects without, I suspect, the more arduous task that has been just set out. My questions, though, are regards to just going back to the C&D project status. If I read through this, I'm led to believe that the external provider has applied for resource consents, and that it is ambitious, best case scenario of June, for the consents and being ready by then. Is there a degree of risk beyond that in terms of those consents not being met? How confident are we that the external provider is going to be able to meet those expectations as part of the application process?
Yeah, the external provider does have similar facilities elsewhere, not within the Wellington region, north of the North Island, and doesn't seem to have too much of an issue with gaining consent for the same type of facility here. And I have asked quite pointedly, you have checked with Greater Wellington, because it can be difficult gaining consent through Greater Wellington, because it will be a GW consent. They don't seem to see that there's an issue with that.
Okay. I have a quick question just regards resource recovery. I just want to make sure that because it's not entirely clear, Trash Palace and Porirua is defined as resource recovery. It's just an expansion of the existing network across the entire region is what this is related to, correct?
Yes, you would consider Trash Palace part of the overall
existing
regional
network.
Yep.
Okay. I have other questions with regards to the local action plans. I can
Go for it.
Okay. So on diligence, page 40, guys. So I just want to go through the, actually page 41, sorry, my apologies, I don't know, mate. Action point 2 relates to conversations that include Ngāti Toa. Obviously, there needs to be action and delivery on this. Do officers have some idea of the time frame of when we'll see meaningful outcomes from that korero with Ngāti Toa?
Not at this stage. I can check in with the team and be ready to report back to the next committee.
Regards to action point 9, appreciate that there is some work being done in terms of a web page. Is there not a possibility here of maybe looking at a literature review of options that are already or are soon to be undertaken across the motu to assist council in terms of being able to show some level of work for us to see?
Yeah, through the chair, we're just discussing, I believe we have this as a regional action as well, and this may have been one of the tasks that we've had on our local action plan for some time. Certainly the regional officers group has discussed various methods of holding a website of regional resource, regional information, etc. That might be, for example, the Greater Place Less Waste website that we set up for the current WMMP. On this one again, though, I think I'd like to report back on with this action for the next committee, but we can discuss at our regional officers level whether we would be better doing this as a regional action.
I have one more question. It's a bit of a wide one, so bear with me while we get through this one. So I guess when I come back to looking at action plan progress on points 11 and 17, I guess it feels like there's not a lot happening in this space. I look at the overall bar graph, I see a lot of orange, I don't see as much green. I'm hopeful that officers will be able to show the working in the next report to show progress in those spaces. I'll withhold the broader comment with regards to how best to report the BAU component, but just to point out that even the commentary itself could illustrate the BAU components in terms of the paragraphs of each of these. So it still keeps it high level. It does not require a massive change to templating, but it could at least, as I see it, the action plans that we have and the deliverables that we have as a region will be seen by the public as new initiatives, new measures to help us improve on the work that we are already done. BAU is essential in terms of maintaining the baseline, but in terms of making further progress, we need to see progress on the new things that are being done. I understand that we need to keep BAU in there, but that's only to just highlight that we're not slipping back on those things as well. I'll leave it there, so kia ora.
Okay, kia ora, thank you. Any other questions? I've got some more. Okay, David and Jeff, this one's for you. The landfill extension out at Poriroa, so you'll be aware that Wellington City has gone through its own painful process. We got it down from 100 years capacity to around 25. It's a massive rat to swallow. That was even too much. I'm just curious what your process is, just given we don't want to create lots of extra capacity in the region.
I'll let David lead out with the response, and then if there's any other additional commentary, I'll add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in our current LTP, as we have shown for the last few LTPs, we had a program of maintaining use of Spicer landfill through to the early 2050s. So current LTP struck only, well, less than a year ago, we maintained that position. Officers' advice to councillors in November last year was that we don't believe that that's possible. And the presentation I undertook to council in early November was that the future of Spicer landfill is not what they think it is. We'll be approaching our senior management team and then council somewhere around the middle of the year with 4 options for the future of Spicer landfill. Two of the options involve closing in 2035. One is complete closure, and the other is closure as a Class 1 and reopening as a Class 2, which is essentially the likes of C&D, clean fill, rubble, that sort of thing. But with the addition of a more substantial refuse transfer station for residential drop-off. So that would be 2035, either full closure or closure as a Class 1. The other option we'll be taking middle of the year is closure in 5 years, either full closure as a Class 1 or closure as a Class 1 and reopening as a Class 2. That's what we're looking at the moment. So as I say, the background there may have come from the fact that we are currently building another cell. That cell is intended to take us through to 2030, which is the expiry of the current consent. But with the odour issues we've been having and other operational matters, we don't think it's viable to be seeking a consent for a landfill past another 5 years to give us a bit more time if we need it.
So this is obviously very significant.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Are you relying on Wellington and Hutt to help you?
Well, inevitably, if you have one less landfill, then all the other landfills then have to take up the slack, as Porirua has had to do with other as well for many years as well. I will simply make the comment that I made when this was earlier discussed to me. It puts a ticking clock on our efforts to increase diversion. For me as a councillor and who is also chair of the committee that is responsible for the operations of both the landfill and the wastewater treatment plant, the measures that we have to put in place right now give us time to make better decisions about what the future of Spicer landfill looks like. But also it's also beneficial to the region as a whole as well, not just because we meet some expectations on these goals, but also improving our environment in any case. So I think that for me was a sobering situation in terms of there actually now being a ticking clock. I would also point out that this also has consequences in terms of the pool of money that will be available for the remediation of that site once it is moved into, it no longer being used as a landfill, that whole site. That has cost implications for potentially ratepayers and users of the site between now and that date of closure as well, if there's a rapidly dwindling lifespan of that site as well. So there's for me, it only doubles down my view that we need to move further forward with the issues around diversion, particularly with organics and C&D, which are the two major contributors of landfill volume that go to Spice at the moment.
David, yeah.
Yeah, if I make a couple more comments on top of that too. Just bearing in mind that some of the demand that comes into Spicer landfill comes from north of the region, so it would be, presumably if we're closed, it would stay north of the region, not necessarily come in here. Also, just making sure I have spoken to my peers at both Wellington and Hutt as the situation has emerged, and we've said, goodness, we're not going to be able to keep it open for as long as we think, because obviously if we close, there's an immediate impact both on Southern and also Silverstream. The other important factor not to be missed is that the region is already under severe pressure for disposal of biosolids, sludge from the wastewater treatment plant. So I believe Silverstream already takes biosolids from Kapiti Coast, who have already approached us. Can they bring it to us? Also had an approach from Horowhenua on a couple of occasions, and we can at the moment. We've got a little bit of room, but obviously with no landfill we can't, and that is actually going to be one of the more pressing problems, because most of the other material that comes in can either be diverted, reused, recycled, whatever. Sludge cannot, so it's one of those waste streams at the very bottom of there is nowhere else for this to go heap. So that's going to be a pressing issue with regards to the Three Waters and all of the changes going on there as well.
Depends what you do with the sludge. There is some obviously cultural issues. So bearing in mind that, sorry, that's why my questioning is a little bit sharp, and that's on myself too. Given all the progress made in these action plans, are we doing enough to get there quickly? Because it's not really, for me, a question of whether we do things. We have to do them, and we need to find a way to do them as quickly as possible. And that's why I'm kind of asking questions about progress. 5 years is nothing in local government terms. It will go by very quickly. So the question really, in essence, is are you satisfied with progress given the enormous constraints we've got?
I would say that question is probably one for the committee to answer, whether you feel confident that we're doing enough. What I can say is that based on existing resources and the plan that is in front of it, we've got the projects in place to deliver on, or at least work as well as we can towards those targets. But achieving them obviously is conditional on a number of factors, whether it's consenting a C&D facility or opening a new facility up in Maina Park for C&D waste, or whether it's getting a way through the challenges around putting in place a FOGO service. If these things are not delivered, there's no question that we can't deliver on the targets.
Yeah. Just my last question for now. It's more a Wellington City and Hutt question, but it will maybe affect other people as well. The issue of equity between single households and MUDs is one which gives me deep concern, because we can't discriminate on the basis of your housing typology. So I know Wellington City's been thinking about it at least for a while, but are you turning your attention to that just to make sure that people are getting a reasonable level of service?
I can answer that for Hutt City Council. So for our service methodology, we're looking at a potential hybrid model. So that'll be effectively a situation where a suburban household has got 3 bins, a recycling bin, a rubbish bin, apart from the glass crate, and a FOGO bin, which is a combined bin for food and green organics. Lower Hutt City doesn't have a lot of multi-unit dwellings yet, although that is changing. So there are situations where we have alternative collections in place. Alternative collections are effectively places where it's an apartment block and you have a common waste storage area rather than each unit or a household having their own set of bins. So effectively you have a situation where the bins are shared, and in that case we're looking at a methodology of effectively just having each household getting a smaller caddy for their FOGO waste, and that would then be emptied into those communal waste bins. And that's kind of recognising the fact that most multi-unit dwellings won't have a lot of garden waste or any garden waste. So you would have effectively a hybrid model of some households would, given their context of just generating food waste, would effectively just divert their food waste, versus suburban households that can generate both.
Okay, but
so that model, just to follow up, that model is the very same model that we use for our recycling and rubbish service. So we don't differentiate between multi-unit dwellings on council service versus others. All our households are on council's service, and we customise it depending on what the household situation is. So if it's a multi-unit dwelling, we have an alternative collection with shared bins. We don't say to that multi-unit dwelling or the owners of them that you need to sort your own. So we have a customised approach to those sort of situations.
So it's helpful. Obviously our city's quite different. All of these buildings, we don't service. Okay, so just a really important issue for everyone. All right, can I just ask the Wairarapa councillors? Lovely as always to have you here. Have you got any questions? Do you need any help? No, you're happy with progress? Oh, you want some money,
we don't
Steve?
really have any.
Don't have any money, sorry.
No money, and no questions at the moment. I think certainly for us in South Wai, we're going through our LTP process at the moment, and so just hearing everybody talking about how hard it is budget-wise, very much that echoes well with us. It is a difficult time, and I do also, Chair, really echo your frustration with how hard it is to make progress in areas it feels like it shouldn't be so hard to make progress in, and especially knowing the environmental crisis that we're in on so many fronts, and this feels like something that we should have better control over, and it's hard to hard to be in this space and hard to see a lack of progress, and also when we do make progress, seeing that easily shut down and pushed back. So yeah, difficult times, I think, but no questions. So thanks.
Rebecca, do you think your colleagues will take any money out of the budget? Same for you, Steve, since we're all going through it now.
I don't think so. It certainly hasn't been indicated to me that that's the plan. The organics curbside was always going to be a tricky thing for us to be able to address, because we're quite, in South Wye, we're very spread out. We're a bunch of small towns. We also have a lot of people who do their own gardening and composting, and so it's probably not as much of a pressing need for us, and was likely to represent quite a big investment. My understanding of it from what I've seen is that we're looking at ways that we can really work with our community to make this happen on a local and progressive way. But it hasn't been indicated to me that money's going to be taken out of the budget directly for this.
That's brilliant. Steve, what about your budget?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I'm pretty sure that our budgets will remain the same. We're not proposing to make any drastic changes to the second year of our long-term plan. So I think we're in a good space there. I do have one question around point 32 in the report, just around the wording in that report, because I feel there is an opportunity, especially for the Wellington region and the Wairarapa side of it, having such a large agricultural farming base, to utilise gypsum from the GIB board. And I keep raising this, and I actually believe that it is one of the easiest and simplest ways to actually make a massive difference to the amount of C&D waste of plasterboard going to landfill, and the damage that it causes can be worse than food scraps as such, organics. So I just feel that the separation of the plasterboard is something that can be done quite easily. It's just funding that is required to purchase a turbo separator, and the size of that turbo separator, there are many different sizes, but I just think that is a huge, just something that would make drastic difference to the amount of C&D waste that we're putting in our landfill. And I'm just wondering if there can be more focus on just a bit more focus on plasterboard and the difference that it can make. So that's just something I just think in the wording, in some of these points, I just think we've got to be careful of what the wording that we've put in there, because I think there are easy solutions, but we're not really focusing on them.
Officers, do you want to respond to that? I know we're going to get into C&D soon.
I'm not sure I can respond to that at this point. Looking at the facility that Porirua is looking at, that whether or not that's included in that infrastructure, I can't tell.
No, GIB board's not specifically included with machinery targeted to GIB board. I mean, the party we're talking to is providing some equipment of its own. We can certainly say to them, how about we add turbo separator? I haven't come across it, but we can talk about it with them.
That would be great. And if you could get back to Steve, that would be super helpful. Yeah. Okay. So just being really thorough here, any last questions before we go into C&D? Helen.
I just have a couple of questions, and one that would really help us. So just to be quite clear, we're not taking any money out of our annual plan or LTP that is already there. We're consulting on curbside recycling and organics, just so that everyone knows that that's where we're at. The other thing is, I do wonder, and it will be very helpful, I'm sure, to all my colleagues around the table, where are we with regard to consistency of regional bylaws?
Good question.
Because if we've got a regional roadmap and plan, then that would certainly help me around my council table to say this supports what is legislated that we have to have, which is a waste minimisation plan.
Can I ask the councillor just to clarify the question, because we do have a regionally consistent bylaw, which apart from a couple of paragraphs that are slightly different, I think, for Kapiti and one of the other councils, the bylaw is exactly the same in terms of the wording and the consistency.
So thank you for your question. So I'm going to page 27 where it says upcoming construction and demolition activities, and it's in the very first paragraph, opportunities are being explored to develop regionally consistent approaches to implement components of regional bylaws. So if we've already got one and there are only a couple of components that KCDC are a little bit different of and maybe another one, it would be good to know, but then why have we got that as an action plan?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So the bylaw is consistent. What isn't consistent, or where there isn't agreement yet, is the implementation of the C&D bylaw requirement. So we have a requirement that's been live for a while for basically developers that have a project over a certain value. I think for most councils it's 2 million in terms of the consenting value, to have a waste management and minimisation plan in place. That requirement hasn't actually been implemented by all councils. I think Wellington has got at least a template in place, but it's more than just a developer even sending through a plan. Someone needs to review it and look at it and make, for example, ask for changes to reflect the intent. If that's not in place, then it hasn't been implemented. So at least for Hutt, for example, I can say we've started work on this, but it hasn't been implemented yet.
And the reason why I say that is that if you go to our regional plan, it's one of the things that is a work in progress. So I was wondering, why is it a work in progress if we're waiting for a regional perspective? Because then I can take it back to my offices and say, where are we at?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the bylaw requirement in terms of C&D waste is effectively for developers to have a waste minimisation plan in place, waste management and minimisation plan in place for their development, if it meets the threshold. Now, the bylaw itself only requires that the applicant effectively specifies what they're doing. It doesn't require diversion. Right. It just specifies what they're doing. However, ultimately the aim is that we also want diversion to occur, not just for people to say, we're going to have a bin there and that's how we're going to manage it and this is how we minimise litter. Because there is no C&D processing facility in place or a very clear pathway, there's been a little bit of push-pull where on the one hand, we want to implement the bylaw requirement. On the other hand, we're saying, well, it kind of would be useful to wait until we have some processing before we ask developers to actually put a lot of effort into this. So there's kind of a bit of a chicken and egg situation between the two. And in some ways, it would be beneficial to know more about what's happening on C&D processing before we go full house on implementing that particular requirement. Otherwise, it would just be saying, you send us a plan and you tell us how you manage the waste, but we're not expecting you to divert anything because there isn't any opportunity to do that.
And I appreciate your answer, absolutely I do. And this is where sometimes I get frustrated as an elected member with regard to looking at all of our regional and local projects and seeing the push-pull as to what we're waiting on to happen regionally for us to deliver our local ones that we've consulted on, as well as the regional plans. And that sometimes it's a little bit difficult when I stand at our recycling place saying, we don't have a timeline, but we are working on these things. So it is a frustration, and I'm sure that it is just as much a frustration for the officers. But if we could get some clarity around this, because it would be very, very helpful in any conversations I have.
Yep. Great, Jeff, and then we'll break for morning tea.
Thank you. These are just subs in regard to Councillor Swale's line of questioning. I think perhaps in the next report it would be good to get some indication of timeframes around that harmonisation work, because as was talked about previously with regards to the C&D site for Tawa / Porirua, and obviously there are other locations also coming on stream in due course. I think that we do know that there is a date for that coming up, and I think it would be good for council officers to be able to start putting a pin on the calendar about when this is going to start to bear fruit. Again, just in terms of that context of delivery, is that reasonable in terms of a request for the next report? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Cool. The other one is, and this might be just a very quick question. Although individual councils will meet the need of reviewing and dealing with that incurs a cost. My understanding that from a cost recovery perspective, when it's actually met by and through the fees and charges that councils would charge to developers in terms of meeting those requirements. Is that correct?
Probably depends on the approach that each individual council takes, but at least looking at Hutt City Council, it would be our waste minimisation advisors that would provide feedback on this. So that part would be funded through the waste levy, but if there is associated work in the consenting team, then they would invoice for the fees and charges.
Yeah, I guess I know that there will be some, again, it will be horses for courses for each of the individual councils, but if there is some commentary, as we go through this, maybe not necessarily in the next report, but certainly as we go through, commentary talking about that as well, just so we got clarity about that. I'm sure that there'll be people within the public who will be wanting to, and developers obviously always like to, worry about the price of fish, and I'll leave it there for the time being. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. All right, if that's all the questions for that part, should we just take a 10-minute... Oh, yes, sorry, Andy.
Yeah, it's just digging into the detail a little bit. A couple of the local action reports mentioned tyre wires, and I was just looking at their website, and there are collection sites in, Kapiti and the Wairarapa and in Porirua. I just wondered, this seems like a very simple one, tyre wires, in terms of setting up collection sites, and where the government across the country has been trying to standardise things like what can be collected in curbside recycling. So I guess my question is for Lower Hutt and Wellington City, is there an intention to have tyre-wise collection sites at our landfills? It just seems like if people in our region knew you can take a tyre to a landfill, because that's a standard approach across our region, that's quite a simple thing for them to know, rather than you have to go and look at a website, maybe you can take it to landfill. In fact, if I live in Lower Hutt, I have to take it to another city currently to do it. So I'm just wondering if there was any intention from the other councils to have tyre-wise collection sites.
I can answer that for Hutt City Council. So we did look at that when the scheme was finalised, but we made the decision not to have a collection point at Silverstream landfill, and that's because under tyre-wise, as a household, you can drop off up to 5 tyres at any one point in time at your local tyre retailer. So there's actually no need to go to the landfill. And in fact, we don't want them at the landfill because they're just very difficult to handle. So we made the decision, at least for Silverstream, that we wouldn't have a collection point, and we're appointing people to just drop them at your local retailer. You don't need to go to the landfill.
Maybe then it's some feedback our council's got offer to the TyreWise program, because if I go and look for a collection site, there's literally not one listed in Lower Hutt or in Wellington. It's only those ones. There's 4 of them listed in our whole region, which are a couple of transfer sites in Kapiti, one at Martinborough, and Espicer landfill. So yeah, might just be a communication issue on part of the program. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. So if we come back to the table at 11:15, that would be great, and then we can talk about C&D. Thank you very much, everyone. Unfortunately, we were hoping to have an operator come in today to talk about C&D, but unfortunately he has been sick, so which would have been just really good just to have a really practical conversation about that. So I will talk to the staff about whether he comes in June or whether we have a special extra session. So I'll have a further conversation about that. All right. Thank you, Ewan and David. Is there anything you want to say about the C&D, or can we get straight into questions?
Straight into questions, please.
Right. Who wants to go first? I know there'll be lots of questions about this. Oh, go on. You're the one who's doing the biggest one at the moment, the quickest.
Thank you, Whaia Upoko. Officers, thank you very much for bringing in the material in regards to this part of the take. I was going to reflect on when I briefly talked to the chair yesterday about this. Her and I are both of the same opinion. We like pictures. We do like pictures. That's nice. But without being too flippant about this situation, in terms of the sites that are being progressed, and noting what is on notice in the papers, do we face any issue in terms of those sites not being able to meet the potential volume, knowing full well that this is market driven in terms of end users for those items? I think about some products are going to be easier. We've already heard about gypsum already, because there's already an extensive approach being done nationwide already with that product. But I guess I'm trying to get ascertain the degree of risk that the sites aren't going to be able to meet the capacity needs that the region requires.
Yeah, I might take that first, Chair. So the equipment that has been purchased for the facility that we'll be putting up has been bought on the basis of an annual turnover of 15,000 tonne, which was considered to be a good start point as a regional capacity. Certainly, if we do convert Spicer landfill to a Class 2, that adds a whole lot more capacity with regards to rubble, clean fill, etc. The company which we're leasing to is augmenting the 3 pieces of equipment that we've got sitting in Masterton, the pictures in the report. That they're going to be adding to that with a pre-screening machine that will allow them to take a little bit more on board as well. With regards to the site they're looking at, they'd probably be a little constrained with regards to future expansion. However, I might leave it at that. So 15,000 tonne per annum is a pretty good start.
I note that that's in that figure's been noted in the report, and so 15,000. You've understood it's this opening volume. Can I just be clear here? Is that a maximum volume, or is it a capacity volume, or is it just the midpoint, for lack of a better phrase?
That's at maximum processing capacity.
I'm going to come back. I'll let some other questions and go.
Colleagues, other questions? Helen, did you have some on this one?
Not on this one, Chair. Mainly Upper Hutt City Council are kind of relying on our other partners in the region to do something here. But when something concrete comes out, I'm sure we would be happy to join the conversation and maybe Pūtea.
At the moment, we're just hoping you get the curbside done. But it would be good to start thinking about the C&D too in your neck of the woods. Any other questions before I ask a couple? Martin?
Yeah, look, not really a question, just more a bit of clarity around how this is meant to work. So we've got a regional committee, a regional grouping of Porirua, Hutt and Kapiti, correct? But that's what it says here. So if anyone else is sort of getting involved in C&D waste, should they be becoming part of that group with regards to openness and transparency and working together in a collaborative way?
Good question, because we are doing something.
Well, that's what I'm referring to. That's not a criticism. It's more of, should we be tying this stuff together? Because I know that the Wellington C&D stuff sort of came a little bit out of left field with some of these other groups, and it'd be good that everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. Is that actually an actual group, or does we just need to put WCC's stuff on that?
No, this is just a regional update on all the different activities that are occurring. It's more of a regionally coordinated group of activities as opposed to a project, given it's made up of several projects. So it's basically a program of work. So there's no intention to leave anyone out. It's just reflecting the activities that are underway.
Sorry, Madam Chair, the question's just actually, I'll reword the question. I wasn't saying anything about that. I appreciate we're preaching and doing this in a regional report back aspect of things. If we've got, say, 3 councils that have sort of put their hand up with regards to stepping forward in this space with regards to that coordination. Different councils will be doing different things, of course, and I don't expect all of it to be reported back on. But if another council's doing something significant in the C&D waste, should they be joining that collective, shall we say, who are focusing on this as a kaupapa, if you like? That's more what I was referring to. It's just that if it can be the same with organics or some other sorts of things. If a council's if a council's deciding to step forward a bit more substantially in this space, maybe they would need to get involved in that particular grouping as well. Don't know, but that was just my question. And I guess it would be more directed. I don't know who would be directed at actually.
Well, maybe the officers answer first, and then we could just have a political quick chat.
With respect to having the knowledge, oversight of all the different projects undertaken within each council, so this is what the function of the regional officers group. So we're frequently meeting, obviously, oversight for the committee to be able to report to the committee everything that's going on. We should know if a council is planning a facility or an action, it would be part of the regional action plan, or it would be visible in the suite of local action plans that are in the WMMP. The Wellington City C&D plan was a little bit of a surprise to us, but we're there now, we're aware of it, and we can look forward to keeping an eye on developments in there.
And I guess what I'm alluding to is that, yep, that's great, it's been incorporated, absolutely fantastic. It would have been nice to have known about it when actually I was looking at conceptualisation, and who's to say that's not going to happen in the future. So I guess what I'm doing is front-footing the conversation around ensuring that people are putting these things forward and they don't become a surprise to our regional group for that reason. Yeah,
so I'll just respond. Look, as I understood it, and I didn't know about Wellington's work either, I mean, it was quite operational, was that there were just some commercial agreements that needed to be held close. But of course, that's what I understand the constraint was there.
Yeah, we could all use that as a reason for not putting information forward. Planning happens. Usually, yeah, well, when you get to that stage.
But we were quite far advanced, and we have been quite open around the work that we're doing on the organics, because we're trying to hold some of that work for the region. So
we're not talking about organics.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying we are talking. It's all very much in the open what we're trying to do with organics. We're grateful that Parirua is first off the blocks in terms of C&D. That's incredibly helpful, and whatever other councils can do is helpful as well. But that is what I was told, that there were some commercial constraints. And given this meeting is held in public, I think there was just some. But of course, we can always go into PX if necessary. So that is a point too. Yeah. But I mean, of course, my very strong view is that if we can do things regionally, we should be. So that's why, I wanted Parirua in on the organics, because it's necessary for us to coordinate while offering our local representation, right? And it makes sense given the waste crosses boundaries. Obviously for the Wairarapa, that is more challenging, right? Yeah. But of course we should be able to do that. And I think there's a real issue if some of the bigger councils, which of course can carry more of the weight, but you then have service providers and clients, and do some of the smaller councils want to be those clients? And that is obviously an issue for those councils to talk about. We've pulled back for some reason, I'm not quite clear. We were a client of Hut on dog control for a long time. So, it can work, yeah. But I think there's a thing about making sure that people have agency, so if you're in the tent, then you've got more control over what happens in your rohe. would be my point.
Yeah, all due respect, Madam Chair, we have a policy at our council this triennium, no surprises. It works, and that tying with transparency as well. So I hear what you're saying with regards to information we perhaps don't want in the public domain, but I'm not asking about specifics. I'm just talking about generally a project that's being worked on. So I hear what you're saying. I'm just flagging it that in the future, it'll be nice if we are made aware, even if it is at a high governance level, at public excluded. That's fine, as long as we're aware of what is going on. We're supposed to be working collaboratively.
Yeah.
Stuff coming out of left field's not working collaboratively.
And that's what we're trying to do. And obviously, sometimes that becomes tricky because in our case, we were just doing something on our own, or other councils have constraints and can't come on board to do things. It is a difficult and demanding model. So that's obviously why we're all just trying to make things work as much as possible. Helen.
I have a couple of questions in the sense that Porirua are saying that their capacity is 15,000 tonnes annually. My first question to Porirua is, I'm assuming there is a restraint with regard to growth of that facility, so that's where we're capped at, is 15,000 tonnes annually. Is my first question. My second question is to Wellington City Council, with the work that you're doing in the C&D, what is the capacity of your facility with regard to processing C&D? And the reason why I'm asking these questions of both councils is that with the building program and the projection of the growth of population in the Wellington region, I know that what's happening in Upper Hutt is that a lot of developers are buying the dream quarter-acre section and demolishing them and putting in multi-units. So I see that possibly the C&D is certainly going to increase. So from a timeline perspective, knowing that our infrastructure plans are for 30 to 50 years, it would be nice to know that we're looking at that kind of timeline when we look at some of these projects.
That is a good question.
With respect to our facility, I wasn't part of the project that scoped up how much room might be required. It's going back a few years. However, one of the motivators behind getting such a facility was when we were looking at very large-scale development in Porirua East through the Kaianga Order project, and realising that potentially there were thousands of houses that were going to be taken down. Notwithstanding that, project's largely off the table now. Nonetheless, the project, as I say, was based on the fact that we were going to get hit with a whole lot of demolition material. So whether, I will assume that the projections that were done in order to say this is how big it needs to be would have been looking at Porirua City. We have a 10-year view of all development that's anticipated within the district, and that means greenfield and brownfield as well, which is where most of the future demolition will come from. So the 15,000 is based on quite a long-term, will be based on quite a long-term view. The other thing, and I'm not going to try and answer Wellington's C&D capacity-wise, however, just an important note, the facility that we're looking to establish is 100% diversion. That means that everything going in will be leaving the site either as material bound for markets where it can be reused or reprocessed. Realistically, there will be some material, and it could be in the order of 30%, that is left at the very bottom that still needs to go to landfill anyway. However, it's not a disposal site, it's a 100% diversion site. The C&D facility, as I understand, and if anyone from Wellington City can chip in, doesn't necessarily, is not 100% diversion.
Chris, are you able to? Yeah, hey, Chris.
Yeah, but so I couldn't be there in person. Yes, it's a combination of both. I mean, there will be some disposal there, but they also, as part of the contract, are looking at also to set up resource recovery. And the capacity, it was a 30-year contract, so the capacity that they're looking at is in the millions. So that helps.
So that's good. So I'm treading on slightly sensitive political ground. We have argued a lot about this in Wellington City, but generally you would consider from an environmental perspective you should reuse what you've got. So that building over there, I think, is one we're hoping to convert into apartments, right? So that hope, and that's why we've got our Te Kāinga program, that you use what you've already got first before you start building and demolishing. Like, it just, from an environmental perspective, makes sense. So hopefully that can be done where possible. But I think what's interesting is how much capacity do you think we need? Because we can, I heard your answer, but it's kind of like, okay, so we've got 15,000 over here and whatever, 30,000 in Wellington City. But does that mean we still need Manor Park coming online? And how much more? And maybe up north, up the region too.
We don't have any information yet on the capacity of that potential facility at Manor Park. We know that Waste Management has proposed including some sort of C&D processing there, but we don't know how much capacity that is, and they haven't shared that information yet. So unfortunately, I can't provide any further information on this at that point.
So I'm just going to come back to the question that we spent quite a lot of time on. Do you want to ask about that? Sorry.
No, another one about the C&D, because one of the reasons that drove that question is not only the growth projections that we've got for our region, but also we need to put a sustainability overlay with regard to possibly, an event like Gabrielle. What are we going to do with regard to that stuff? And do we have the capacity? Because, what Remo and other people are doing, there is an awful lot we know just by what's happened with Gabrielle.
So that's why I've always been keen on that. There's a disaster preparedness action point because we know that's going to happen, right? There will be definitely earthquakes and extreme weather events. So we're obviously looking forward to progress on that as well. So the question that we talked about in December talked about when Andy and I met with you, Yun, just around figuring out the pathway for C&D waste. So I completely understand that there are some things that we do not have control over, but given that we're starting to bring up this network, are we able to now start putting some basic points on a bit of paper saying, this is where you can do your C&D disposal here, here, and here, and this is where the gap is here. And these are the kind of materials that we can deal with. There are some that we can't, and then we need to look to see if there's someone that could come into the market.
Yeah, so following that feedback, we've scheduled a separate meeting among the regional councils to discuss, the things that will have to go into that pathway. So my expectation is that by June we will have something a little bit more concrete.
Okay. And it can be basic.
Can be basic.
We get that.
But I just want to manage expectations that, it will not be the silver bullet in terms of the...
No. But it's just getting started on it, and then it can evolve over time. Right, because this problem is not going to go away depending on which train and we're in or which government we've got. Right. Yeah, and endures. Okay, so thank you very much for taking that feedback on board. That's really appreciated, and I think will be quite exciting. I think people will be and not just us, more people will be interested. Other questions, Jeff?
Before I get into my questions, I just want to reiterate the chair's point about some insight will be better than no insight at all, and I agree that no one should. You guys as officers should not be held to account necessarily for rough back of the postcard estimates at this stage. But it is important for us to get a sense of what lies ahead, because it leads to conversations within the individual councils about any other additional measures that need to be looked at. In the next term, as part of an LTP, there may need to be some further thinking in that beyond 10-year period that talks about it. Of course, one of the major factors is that the economic position of Wellington, irrespective of growth projections, is still a factor. Sitting around the table with regards to the oversight of the Spicer landfill, we've had a plateau, relatively speaking, over a period of time, say since the last 6 months, where the overall waste has not increased. It's just plateaued. Now, officers' commentary on that has been that the economic position has meant that there hasn't been as much growth in terms of construction and demolition waste being produced or ending up at the landfill. But we can't control that factor. We just need to be mindful of it, that any numbers that are being put up here can be hugely variable, and we have to have a working assumption until that working assumption changes. Right, here comes my part.
You've got quite a lot of development going on in your neck of the woods, so we will expect to see those kind of things put in where we know there's lots of,
Agreed, but also to follow on that point about just being transparent in terms of working regionally, all of the clocks across the region in terms of their local action plans all have to strike 12 at the same time in 5 years' time. The path and the means to do so may vary slightly. We need to be clear about that. But we do need to meet our goals. Our communities require us to meet those goals as well. Here come my part though. Strap in. Carbon reduction is referenced in the report in terms of the potential for these locations. And I'm trying to recall when the business case was brought to put into City Council, whether there was any detail around what that could mean in terms of overall reductions. Is there any commentary you guys have got around that? Again, this might be a really hard thing to ascertain because of the nature of it still being quite nebulous in the implementation.
Can I just check, are you referring to the FOGO workstream or the C&D workstream?
C&D.
I don't think there was a lot of detail on the potential emission reductions associated with C&D waste. There certainly was for FOGO, but not so much for C&D. But you might refer to David on the particular proposal.
Yeah, as we've been speaking to council and senior management about organics versus C&D, we've tried to be very clear. The C&D was about reducing the amount of demand coming in. Organics was reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions being created. So yes, there will be some saving in terms of emissions from not having certain waste streams, and plasterboard is certainly one of them, rotting away in the landfill. However, it wasn't a critical component of the equation. We need to have C&D because we have to reduce how much is going in terms of capacity.
Sub-related to that, I guess one area that sits in the C&D waste, but also could argue be in that organic waste category, is around soil, contaminated soil and so forth, and that in terms of the climate impact on that. So is there any additional commentary you want to add just with regards to that part of the problem?
So with contaminated soil, just draw your attention to the update.
That's exactly what I've been reading to.
So that is a project that Hutt City Council has been looking at with Fulton Hogan. Yeah. So that, depending on the definition, in some countries it's counted as C&D waste, in some others contaminated soil is not classed as C&D waste. For all practical purposes, it arises in relation to development activity. So for all practical purposes, we can include it. That particular project really just targets that particular waste stream. So an example would be Nainai Pool. When that was built, there was about 20,000 tonnes of contaminated soil. It was literally just your soil out of a suburban area. It was just above the threshold levels for, I think, some couple of heavy metals, but it was just over the limit, so it had to go to a Class 1 landfill. That project is really about putting it through a wash plant so that you can take it out again and reuse it again. And so the end products coming out after the process would be things like aggregate and different levels of soil grades. So ultimately, a big impact, if that goes ahead, would be around reducing the demand on airspace, not necessarily so much greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay. I look forward to follow-up updates on that one. Future pathways, this is going to sit more into the Wellington City space of it. I guess for me, we talked earlier about the bylaws and the implementation, but I'm also just wanted to make sure that they're part of a feedback loop that sits into that future pathways work once it gets back up and running as well. Is that something that officers are mindful of already in terms of that is, can they come up on stream?
Can you just rephrase the question? I'm not quite clear what you're looking for.
So perhaps I'll put it as by way of example. The work around future pathways, for me, would relate to providers who are taking on this diversion work and taking their feedback in terms of the types of waste and the types of opportunities that they're being used as a part of a feedback loop to enhance the work that we've done in the future pathways in terms of breadth, depth of the types of waste and the types of capacity that a future facility or future network requires.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, ultimately, which is one of the challenges we've had with developing this pathway document, now that it's a little bit clearer what you're after, is that ultimately it's hard to develop that without knowing what sort of waste streams they would be diverting and what the markets are. So ultimately the markets is not so much and I hear the comment earlier about gypsum, for example. In principle, it's reasonably simple to separate it out, but the question is who's got the incentive to separate it out? And even once you've done it, where does it go? Who's taking it and who's doing something with it? So if, for example, this material currently goes to a C&D landfill, and let's say, for argument's sake, the cost is $50 a tonne, if the processing costs more than that, it's not going to happen. So the economics of the space is particularly important, and this is where the feedback from providers comes in. We kind of rely on them to tell us where are the markets, and by way of example, we looked at it for Silverstream Landfill, for example. What if we separate out treated timber? If that was possible, where would we send it? And the cost came out higher than the cost to landfill it, and we're talking like $200 and $250 a tonne. So the question then is at what point does it become viable? I guess the waste levy is quite a critical component to this. Obviously, the higher it is, the more likely it is that other alternatives become more cost effective. But until that's the case, until we reach that tipping point, we're sort of a little bit, moving around the edges of that space.
I keep reminding myself of the chicken and the egg situation with regards to this. However, this will be a point that I think that as members of the representatives will be coming back to keep putting a light on, because of the need to be constantly agile in terms of where this ends up. It's all well and good to have these networks, but they do need to go somewhere at the end of it. Last part time. Yep. Here we go. In the absence currently of implementation of the regional bylaw with regards to contractors and C&D disclosing that their management plans, what role does individual councils play in outreach to contractors once these new sites come up online to actually encourage them to participate in the work that they're doing? Where does council sit in that role?
Yeah, just with respect to, obviously, we hope to have a C&D facility running soon. Our role would be critical, I would think, that whereas we've got enablement in the bylaw that we can require a waste management plan to be submitted by a developer, we haven't, as discussed earlier, pushed that out yet. We would be wanting to push that out, of course, when there is a facility to be able to take material to. But with respect to what role would we have once that's in place, it would be very important for us to be going out there to developers. We've already spoken to a couple anyway with regards to the imminence of a facility nearby. Make sure they know that it's ready to go.
Brief reflection just on that response. I think that as part of the commentary from a high level in the future reports, it would be good to see as part of the narrative the work that councils are doing in that space, so we know that contractors are aware and that we are trying to navigate them, signpost them to go towards those facilities. I'm mindful that for some councils, they may not have the implementation of the bylaw in place in time. That is not, in my view, a justification for us to not do some form of engagement with contractors to enhance their participation with any new facility. Kia ora.
Andy? Oh.
Sorry, just going to ask Stephanie to bring to your awareness something called the Build Cluster, which has been going on for a wee while.
Yeah, so it's been mentioned in the report a little bit, but this is it's a regional initiative which has been Is that better? Oh, yeah, that sounds better. So it's a regional initiative set up by officers and industry and not-for-profits, and it's kind of very organic, very low level, bringing people together to identify, to talk about construction and demolition, not just about the waste, but about how does it get prevented in the first place. So at all levels, I don't want to oversell this at this point, so it's in its early stages. There's about 20 of us came to the last meeting, and we're trying to make sure it's a balance, that it's not too council heavy. It's following a model that's been introduced around the country with other build clusters. We might have tradie breakfasts and talk about different initiatives. So we spent a bit of time in our last meeting discussing what the purpose of it was, so to make sure that it was really clear that it wasn't what people thought it might be, or just to be really clear on those expectations. And so through that, it was agreed that it was about sharing information and knowledge. It wasn't about delivering projects. So we do have a couple of the big construction companies there, which is really good. A few councils, a few consultants, brands, some other people around the table as well. So more information will come out of that. We're meeting every 6 weeks to 3 months is the kind of the frequency for a couple of hours.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, I had a question for Ewan, but maybe just cuts across those last comments as well, because when you were speaking, Ewan, about the need for markets for some of this diverted product, I wondered what our role is in advocacy to central government to support the viability of markets for reused products. I mean, clearly it makes sense to reuse glass and reuse plastic, otherwise the private market wouldn't be doing it. Paper pulp's another one. But some of these other things where, you know, there's not quite enough value offer in a reused product, is there an advocacy piece we can play to central government? How do we incentivise people to actually reuse rather than drawing raw products from the earth because it's cheaper to currently do that thing? So is that an advocacy role for us? And then just cutting across the last commentary too, is it also an advocacy role for us to the industry to promote the use of recycled or reused products instead of raw materials all the time?
Yep, so there is, in fact, there is a regional action on advocacy opportunities, and we are pursuing that where appropriate. I do note that in this, just in the last meeting, there was discussion about the letter to government around the container deposit scheme, which would be a product stewardship scheme, and also the review of the waste levy, all of which will have implications in terms of councils. So ultimately, there's definitely a need for this, because a lot of the decisions that we're dealing, or the waste products that we're dealing with, have been generated because there is a lack of, I guess, a lack of not just regulation, but in terms of lack of framework to actually do something differently with that, whether it's to avoid the waste in the first place at the design stage, or having more incentives in the right place. So at the moment, the incentive is just to dump it and then let councils deal with it. But how do we shift that upstream? So I guess that's where advocacy comes in.
You may not have had time to look at the news today. It's all a bit topical. Contract management. This is in the water space. I presume that we've got good process in place for managing all waste contracts, and that when we do new ones, we'll be really rigorous, because the problem being in a country of 5 million people, there aren't that many people who actually do some of this work unless we go overseas.
Sorry, was that a question?
It is a question. Are our processes really, really rigorous? Because there's just a report out today saying that Wellington waters are not.
I can't comment on, the collective of the councils, but I would say that each council will have its own procurement and contract management processes in place. So I guess it's a question for each council to make sure that they are robust and have integrity.
Yeah, there is a learning lesson, I think, except for a few of the councils in the region. We'll be having a discussion about that.
I just will add to that, one of the benefits we've got at PCC, we're not too far away from going out for procurement with some of our major waste contracts since they were struck possibly 6, 7, 8 years ago. Quite a good deal has changed within the procurement space. So, for example, within our procurement processes, we're now required to have weighting for environmental or sustainability outcomes. Same goes with project management. So we've got better processes than we might have had when we took some of the contracts on that we've got today that are starting to age a wee bit.
Okay. So once we get all these reports, we've all compulsory reading for everyone. Yep. Okay. Does anyone have any further questions on C&D? And the Wairarapa, don't want to forget you. You're important people. You don't have any questions? It's obviously trickier for you. No? Okay. All right. And I presume we've asked all our questions around the local action plan update as well. People are happy about that? Yep. Okay. Everyone online? Good. All right. Well, should I move the paper now? It's the final chance for questions. Okay. What's that? The PowerPoint presentation. I don't really want to do quite a thorough discussion. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish the paper? No. Anyone else? Helen?
I'll go after Helen if that's right, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So early this morning there was a letter that was circulated to all of us. Is this the appropriate time to talk about that, or after you close the meeting?
Shall we, just in terms of process, shall we do this paper? We've got the decision one, which I do have a question about, and then we'll close the meeting and then we'll...
Absolutely.
That was part of the action, so we could actually do it as part of the second paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right. So look, I'll move...
Sorry, Madam Chair, I signalled I wanted to say something.
Sorry? Oh, did you want to say something about process? Yeah, sure.
Look, just take this on board as a general comment. I just want a little bit of clarity on a couple of things, and this is fairly broad. So I'm under the impression that the last waste minimisation strategy that was put in place, not a hell of a lot happened. Okay, rights or wrongs, I'm not here to criticise, just not a lot happened.
It's fine.
So what we've been endeavouring to do here is to make what we're doing here meaningful. Okay, so I'm happy with the reporting structure that we've currently got in place, and the reason I'm happy with it is because we're just putting this in place. And I think we've got to be a little bit careful that we don't hammering council officers a little bit too hard, because I'm picking that we're going to get an annual report come sometime soon that's potentially going to have a lot of this stuff in it, and it's going to start creating a base understanding of where we're at so that we can start measuring where we're going. Would that be a fair comment?
So that's a question. We're still doing questions, and then we'll go into debate after it's been moved. Yep.
Yes, so in the past it was around about the September period, so kind of like an annual report. I guess in the past we didn't have as much detail in terms of on a regular reporting basis like we currently have in place. So I would say in the past there would have been a lot of information compared to not having a lot of information regularly updated, whereas now it's probably more of a summary of all the things that actually have been reported on a quarterly basis. And I guess that's where, and thank you for that, and that's where us as reporting back on a quarterly update, being quite succinct about the different things that we're working on, is great, and we can ask the sort of questions that we're asking at the moment. And I guess the other thing is tying in is that our base information, statistically, is not in place yet either. Is that correct? We're using 2021 statistics, and the idea is that starts off at a base and starts us giving something to measure against. Is that right? Yeah. So I just want to say I think we're making great progress with regards to, one of the things I certainly in local government, things don't happen quick, but I think we're actually developing things at quite a good pace at the moment. I just wanted to do that. I guess I give that as a bit of a shout out. It might appear that we're poking a lot of gnarly questions in regards to that sort of stuff, which I think is our role. But we're also heading to a point where we're going to have some measurables that we can actually start measuring against, which hasn't happened very well in the past. And I think it's only at that point that really we can start looking at, okay, are we doing well here? Are we not doing well here?
as such. So I just want people to take that on board. Making sure I'm on the right track with my thinking about where we're going with this. So I'm very much looking forward to that report. These reports are great. We've done it now. We've now got a baseline for moving forward with regards to those updates. So, I'm picking that next time there'll be some updates. This has progressed since last meeting, or this has come on, and that would just be adding to the list that's currently there as we move forward. So, just want to thank council officers with regards to making sure that we're coming together with this. Sometimes we as councillors can be a bit pushy with regards to the wanting of things now, but we are making good progress. There's just a whole heap of stuff that we're trying to pull in at the same time, I think, which is making it seem like we're not necessarily achieving a heck of a lot, when actually I think we're actually achieving a heck of a lot, especially at an individual council level with regards to different things that at that lower level we know what's happening behind the scenes. Just wanted to voice that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. So look, I'm going to move the paper and just taking on board your comments. Look, every single thing that we're doing in this space, I do celebrate, because it has been a hard one. The Enviro Schools program, for example, was put in by the Greens some years ago, hopefully is having some impact on our tamariki, so that they're very skilled as they come into adulthood. So it takes a lot, and obviously when we're in an environment of high pressure on our rates, even maintaining services is also good. And certainly we wouldn't want some of those things taken away. So I just do want to acknowledge that. And certainly many of us have been through quite a long process. I'm really excited about the C&D work going on in some of our councils. We are painfully making progress on organics. We're spending many, many millions of dollars to get the sludge out of our landfill, and looking at that processing plant. Upper Hutt, if you can get a curbside collection, I will dance in the street. Do you do it? Yeah, I will do it. Okay, so I think, and even getting something into a budget going up for public consultation is a huge win. I know it does take literally years. So, thank you to everyone who is working really hard. And which Councillor Hayward and I were talking over the break, we're all here in the same waka. We all want to reduce waste. I think some of my questions are coming from, though, is that because we are now on our third iteration of this plan, in a sense, not much changes. We still have really, really poor data because we just can't get some of the data that we need. We still need to build very, very expensive infrastructure. We need to influence behavioural change, and it does take some time. And certainly what I have learned is that whoever's doing this work in the next triennium, I hope that, because it won't be me, that people will just be able to spring off the work that we've done and move quite quickly and not rely on too much analysis. Councillor Martin, your point about the data is very important, because this has been so frustrating. We spent a lot of time trying to get good data, knowing that we couldn't even get some of it. Then we were hoping that the government would do it centralised, and now they've pulled back on that. So we have to go back to a regional approach. And so we might just have to go into the ether, kind of not having the data that we need. Unless we can get it off the private operators, it's very, very problematic. So I think I really appreciate officers hearing the feedback around the C&D work. If we can keep making progress on the C&D and the organics, we really will have something to shout out about in the next 5 years, to say to people, look, this is what we have done. And just my last point, I very much, actually, even though it's not very good news, appreciated the conversation about the Spicer landfill. This is the whole point of environmentalism, that there are limits to growth, that you cannot just keep dumping or using new resources. And it is a shame, actually, that all of our colleagues couldn't have been here to hear that conversation. And so that, and that really strong commitment to diversion is important, so that we don't have to keep dumping. And as someone said to me last point, why do we need to fill the land? We should not be filling the land. We should not be poisoning the land. We should be regenerating it. So thank you very much. Look forward to the next meeting in June. Councillor Mitchell. would you like to speak? No? Any, Councillor Hayward? Yes, Councillor Mitchell's volunteered him. Sorry. Oh, was it Councillor Hayward? Sorry, did you say?
I can't recall if I seconded, but if it hasn't been noted, then I'm happy to second it. However, Andrew's right there, so I'm not going to get tied up with the bum flufferys of moving and seconding. That said, I do want to reinforce the points that the chair has made in terms of being able to strongly sing from the rooftops about the work that has been done by individual councils and officers. It needs to be stressed how much mahi has been done and continues to be done. Thank you for the work so far. And I guess it is in a broader context, and the next item we're going to talk about around the role that we have of advocacy for central government. We show, by asking these questions again and answered in meetings like this, and also going back to our individual councils and the actions that we take as part of our local action plans, we show our working on our role in trying to do better as kaitiaki. We expect that central government should stand by their commitments as well. And so there is always politics to be played in that space, no doubt. But actually, at the end of the day, we need to be held to account, but they need to be held to account as well. I think that Councillor Halliday's points are well-founded with regards to the nature of the reporting, and I think I was trying to allude to that during my line of questioning, that it is about the commentary, not necessarily about the template or the mechanism of reporting, because that then lies in where we can ask more in-depth questions in meetings like that. I wrote whakaea, the process of settling and making sure that we are safe when we go out of here. Again, endorsing this motion is a signal from the members of this of the representative councils that we are happy that there is a blueprint for action, that there are some areas of tweaking, that we're expecting additional commentary in subsequent reports, but you should see it as an endorsement of the direction of travel in so much as a regional perspective, with those caveats around the extra expectations that are being put in place. Then we will, as individual councils, have the debate about, to a point that was raised earlier, to what degree are we prepared to invest to deliver on the requirements of this plan, and if not, more than that. Kia ora.
Any other contributions? Right. Deputy Mayor, no?
I'll leave my comments for the advocacy, because there's a few things that we need to kind of overlay on there. So I think enough has been said by my two colleagues from KCDC and Porirua. Yep.
Great, thank you. No need for a right of reply. Everyone said sensible things. Okay, so if we could just vote on that. All those in favour of paper 2.1? Aye. Anyone opposed? Sorry, we usually have voting buttons. Kua mana. Right, thank you very much, everyone, for that fulsome discussion. Right, now we just go on to the decision register. Are there any comments that officers would like to make about that?
I'm happy to just take it as read.
Okay, cool. Can I just ask the question, request that each member council confirms at an operational level the necessary funding, delegations and decision-making in place. Have we resolved all that? It was something we agreed a while ago, and when I was just checking the progress report.
No, there hasn't been technically reported back. It's effectively was a request to each of the member councils, but to what degree, what sort of confirmation you're after, that I don't think that was settled on.
Okay, well, I mean, can it be done verbally? I guess the question is, are the people in the room able to give some, they've got enough delegations, the funding is in place? Well, we've had a bit of an informal update on that.
I can certainly, I can't speak for the collective of the councils, but certainly for Hutt City Council, I confirm that all those are in place for Hutt City.
Okay. David?
Yeah, as regards Porirua City Council, I have sufficient delegation at my level in order to be able to represent to the regional group. But also, if there is internal decision making, obviously we're still working through the hierarchy, through my GM and senior management, etc. And that's where I just wanted to point out it will be a little bit different from council to council. Some of us can make decisions at a reasonably high level, some of us can't.
Yeah, that's true. Do any other councils want to comment on that?
Likewise for Upper Hutt, I hold the current delegation.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
And from elected members, we have a delegation that if it's within our LTP, it's fine, it goes ahead. It's when this committee goes out of that scope that we have to take it back to our full council.
Sure. KCDC?
Sorry, Robbie, you were out of the room just talking about delegations and stuff. From my perspective, quite happy. Everything in the long-term plan is budgeted for. But we're very happy heading in the direction we're heading.
Okay.
Yeah, delegations and subcommittees are all okay for us.
Okay, great. All right. And the Wairarapa councils, are you happy? I think I see nods. Okay, thumbs up. Excellent. Right, yes, as it should. For everyone, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions of staff on forward program? Oh, actually, I did have a question. I think I might have asked it before. Can we just put on the forward agenda just government policy decisions, or is that possible?
I think Evie and I discussed this briefly, was whether it was worth putting in the kind of table function that we have in there at the moment, or whether it's reasonable just to include it as part of the kind of like content paper that comes as a recurring section within that.
What would people like? I'm easy in the paper, like if just so, for example, because the government pulled back on all that mandates, just happy to put that in the paper at the beginning of it. Okay, good. Just so it's all recorded, I think that's helpful. And just, Lisa, it was very helpful to have your letter because you went through all of the history around decision making. So like it is helpful to record that. Okay. Any other questions before we get into the letter? Okay. Right. Now, just in terms of the letter, couple of things. First of all, I'm sorry it's taken so long. The process by which we come to a collective is actually quite torturous. So we agreed in December, then it went to the mayoral forum, but I don't think we got entirely clear response. And then I was like, oh, do you want a letter? And then Helen can probably talk to more of this. The officers were kind enough to draft an excellent letter. And then there's just been a bit of back and forwarding. Lisa, your letter was excellent. But what I did do is I took out any criticism, just because we're trying to convince. And also I suggested that we make it a lot shorter because people are busy. And I also just did, attention was drawn to me about this review of the waste levy. And I carefully went through it. There was one comment around local government and whether we were spending the money well. The only problem with that comment was that was on a previous government's priorities. So, they could say, well, we don't like those priorities. But, I think I put in a point there just to hopefully instill some confidence that we are doing what we need to do with the money. Because we have to be rigorous about that money, obviously. So, colleagues, what process would you like to go through? It's still definitely worthwhile sending because we haven't, even though it's just taken a bit longer. Would you like to have reading time now? Would you like to just come back in a couple of days and say, yep, it's good to go? And then it would go to each mayor, I guess, for signing because the next mayoral forum is in May. Is it April? Okay, and then, but I was told that and reminded that there was a regional leadership forum which seems to alternate, which possibly could be, but I'm just wondering if it would just be easier for each councillor to see if their mayor is happy to sign it.
Yeah, I think that would work easier.
And I've tried really, really hard to be quite politic about all this. I've taken out the word concern. Spot me if I haven't taken out every concern, but I did try to remove. So it's just basically saying we do support a full review of the Waste Minimisation Act, and a good review around the levy, but we think we're spending it okay, and then a commitment to CRS, which is a long-standing commitment, I think. Yeah.
Whai Upoko, I'm mindful that I'd like to hear from Councillor Swales in terms of her additional commentary in terms of the context, because that may affect how I look at this moving forward, if that's possible.
Good.
So this was, the waste minimisation was on the CEO and mayoral forum, and what happened was that there was some confusion over the agenda with regards to the conversation, and it was because annually or biannually they have a mayoral forum with local iwi, mana whenua, and what happened was that actually overtook the agenda. Mana whenua were present at the mayoral forum. So whilst it was an agenda item, it got spoken to, never in the depth that we as a committee wanted it to happen. So I've asked my mayor if he will actually retable it to have that conversation. So I think it's really important that we as a collective get our mayors to actually sign this and put it forward. I think the tempering of the letter and the tone of it is far more persuasive in a non-confrontational way, which I think is gently is the right way to go. And many of us around the table who have done advocacy work at a select committee and at that way know that that's a far better way to be heard than to go in there with a big stick and start thumping the table. So we're aware, and I do know that a number of the councils have already sent their own personal letters to the minister to have, and this would just be a supportive letter reminding them that this is something that's mandated, that we have to do, and with the tampering that they're doing without consultation jeopardises things that we have actually landed and agreed with our community. And I think it's important that we say with our community rather than it's something that's come from this forum. So, but I am mindful that in the korero that three of my colleagues have made around here, we need to also be mindful that the RMA Commissioner or the RMA Minister also did a release last week that talked about our development contributions. And I think we need to be cognizant of that when we look at anything to do with waste minimisation, because they're going to start ring fencing what we can put in our development contributions. So, there are lots of things coming at us, and I think we just need to be mindful of the playing field that we're playing in and the impacts on the decisions that we make and where we're going forward. And I also think that we need to not lose sight of the Wellington Regional Leaders Forum, which is looking at the development of commercial spaces and land that is there, and the impact that that will have on any waste minimisation plan that we've got as well. So there's a few things there, and the beautiful thing about it is nothing against our officers. I think they do a great job, but they're in a silo, and it's that silo that they report on. As governance, we need to be across all those silos when we make our decisions.
That's a good point about the levy, development contributions. Do you want to put that in? Just about basically how it intersects, it will just be a one.
Yeah, just a one. Yeah.
What this government's concern will be is around the level of taxation, right? So would the committee's view that it should be an efficient mechanism to cover the costs that local government have to cover? The problem is also what I'm most interested in is the cost of not taking action, right? So, which is always a bit amorphous. Jeff?
I was just, if you're going to use the word phrasing efficient, I would just make sure that it was also placed with efficient and equitable.
We could put is everyone okay with equitable? Okay. 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 That is fine. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think I'm missing something here. We're doing a bit of advocacy around the waste minimisation, the container return scheme specifically. Is that right?
Yeah, that was one thing we agreed, as well as the Waste Minimisation Act review.
Cool. So should these be together?
Oh, yeah.
They are quite different but things. The container return scheme is a specific thing. It was ready to go and got withdrawn. And what we're saying is we want to see it put in place. Completely separate with regards. I think that's getting lost in the general waste minimisation conversation we're putting across in here as well. I think they're two quite separate kaupapa, if you like, with regards to what outcomes we're looking for. One's a more general outcome with regards to waste minimisation and making sure that the things that are being put in place are kept in place, et cetera, et cetera. But the container return scheme is something quite specific. You know, and that's something we should be going a little bit harder, in my opinion, to central government about. Or painting the picture that that's low-hanging fruit that the previous government didn't take the advantage of. It's all there ready to go. To me, this is a nice, easy win for central government, looking good in this space with regards to putting something in place that was fundamentally agreed on. And I can't actually, biggest belief that the last government actually did knock it on the head, because I would have thought this would have been an excellent win for them with regards to things.
So I'm not going to die in a ditch on this. Let's just talk about it. The reason I just suggested we combine them is because otherwise it might have seemed a bit odd to send 2 letters on waste at the same time, and the container deposit is part of the,
I hear what you're saying.
But, I mean, look, open to you, colleagues, we can send 2 letters. It just means we then need to get our busy mayors to focus on 2 letters, not one. Okay. But, I think your points that you make are good, and I think we should include them, that the low-hanging fruit is a good point and ready to go.
Either that, or when putting the letter together, there's literally a section on this that's very, very specific.
So we try to do that. You don't think it's quite...
I just think it gets a little bit lost, to be honest.
I think it's lost. Okay, so what do people want to do? Andy?
Yeah, I think wouldn't describe it as being lost in there. I think that if the letter's addressing 2 separate things, that should be really clear. And it begins by saying the Council of the Wellington Region right in relation to the review of the WMA and the container return scheme. It could literally be A, the review of the WMA, and B, the container return scheme, to make it clear there's 2 issues. I think if we were in a practice of our mayors writing to the Ministry for the Environment consistently and regularly, they probably should have been separate letters, but this is kind of, not something that we do currently. So I think, addressing a couple of things that are pertinent and current to local government is okay in the same letter, in my opinion.
Okay.
And just a comment, I'm perhaps not so excited about the review of the WMA and the Litter Act as other people might be, for one reason, which is consideration of what the intent of any review might be. We kind of saw that in last year's work, that the intent seemed to be actually to free up some cash to spend on other things. So, I mean, I'm all for writing a positive letter, and yes, these things do need reviewing, but I'm personally quite cautious about what the intent of any review is, but that's something to address when the time comes.
Again, I'm not going to ditch over it either, but if I could just make one other comment, I don't think we put enough emphasis on this group. We've got the Council of Wellington Region right in relation. Actually, it's the Regional Waste Minimisation Committee that represents the councils in the area.
So we thought it would be better to come from the mayors, because they've got the authority to speak on behalf of. This has always been a little bit loose about whether this group can actually lobby government or not. But my view was that they do have the authority under legislation, but again, relaxed.
Again, if you want to, we're looking at moving to an advocacy role here, which obviously hasn't been for the last 2 iterations of this, a very strong space. No. So if we're really wanting to emphasise this committee, and this committee's got impact. I think we should be trying to build up the mana of this group, if you like, so that when we do send a letter, it is representative. The mayors can endorse it rather than sending, a whole pile of different letters. Why don't the mayors just endorse this as a letter, as representative of our work in this space? We're supposed to be representing our individual councils.
It's not an unreasonable point, but it was a point that was discussed, last year as part of whether or not that was to go through the mayors or not. It does not stop. It's a. If we go down the path as we currently are with the mayors, it is a lesson for us to consider any other subsequent messages that we wish to send as this committee. I would point out as well, I think that notwithstanding Councillor Swale's points, which I think are very mindful of the broader context, which is important, I'm happy with the direction of travel of this document. I'm mindful of the whakatauki that a camel is a racehorse by committee. So the negotiation in open of the precise wording of a document, notwithstanding my previous comment about the word equity, should stop us from, we should take a moment to think how much time do we want to devote into the wording of this document, because this really is only the first part of a broader conversation that we have to continue to have, hence the reason why we are talking about advocacy, not as our strongest argument in the first get-go in terms of what wording could be in there, but remind ourselves that we still have to continue this corridor afterwards.
And just for clarity on my end, I'm not talking about bypassing mayors. It's just how the easiest way to get that endorsement as such.
And I think the purpose of the letter is just to get our foot in the door. Look, there's no way this government's going to talk to me, because they are very familiar with my views, the ones that are so. Yeah. So I guess I just was reasonably strongly of the view that the mayors are our representatives. They carry the relationships for us. It is their job to try and then Helen and I talked about, well, which mayor, and whether it would be 2 mayors or 3 mayors, or whether, and it might go in with their general. They might be having other conversations too, that they want to talk to Minister Bishop or as well about the RMA. So, Martin, what about if I put in a thing that, the Waste Committee does the heavy lifting for the, I can make a reference to that. Would that be?
Oh, look, I just take this great opportunity for giving emphasis to this group because, and if you say we're stepping into the space, yep, by way of introduction, sure thing. And as I was pointing the leadership forum, this letter needs to really be going to those different groups to then inform our mayors and inform those people in those spaces what this group's thoughts are and what our priority, if we've got an advocacy priority, what that is, and the reasoning for that.
Yeah,
and of course, we don't want to be bogging the processes down. It's only one or two things.
I know, it's so slow. And then Helen and I did offer to go along and brief the mayors because we wanted to make sure they understood how serious this matter was. I think Andy makes a very good point, actually. That is a worry. The problem is when I read the legislation, I think it needs to be rewritten. It was, 2000 or leading up to 2008. It's old-fashioned. It needs but you are quite right that could not be good because the direction of travel will be to reduce that levy. And maybe just to have a stronger focus on basic infrastructure, which is not where we are going as a region. So that maybe I could qualify that the region is committed to waste minimisation. Should I put that in?
I think that's clear in the letter. I was just raising that issue for this room. I don't think it's something that needs to be addressed in this letter. It may need to be addressed in future consultation, but it really depends on what's proposed from the government.
Yeah, so I guess that's just the point of getting our mayors in front of the minister to say, look, this levy money is important to local government. We need it to turn things round. Using the example of Parirua, that there's 5 years left, is a very powerful statement, right? Yeah. And I think the tourism angle is quite strong too, which is why I put that in there. We just can't have everything polluted with our waste and then encourage people to come in here. It's not a good look. So the points I've got around is equity around the levy, the DC, just the general context, reference to the WMMP committee and the low-hanging fruit of the CRS, all the work's done, it's a great win. If I put those points in today and send it out to you today, I'm sorry because it's taken me so long, then can we sign it off just and then I will get someone else to do the... Lisa, will you be the editor?
I'd probably need to check internally before I can really commit.
It was just a matter of making sure there's no spelling mistakes because it wasn't to make significant changes to the content. She did a great job. It was just, because I get too familiar with my own work and then I miss things.
That I'm fine to check all that.
Or the three of you can just, okay. And then if we get that signed off by elected members today, and then we can start just saying to the mayors, can you individually sign rather than waiting for another meeting? Does that sound okay to everyone? Yeah, okay. And then we can do some work behind the scenes just to see if we can get that meeting happening. Yeah, okay. That is good. Is there anything else people want to say on this? Helen?
Yeah, can I just say, and to address the point of, the mayors are the ones that are elected to be the vocal point, and I do understand that, we are trying to step out of a space to make this regional committee a voice that plays in central government. But, there are other ways that we can do that. I've got a meeting with Minister Pink and Minister Bishop. I have access to other ministers like Louise Upston. I think we need to take advantage of those opportunities when we do speak to ministers, and actually we can have that corridor around this is the position that the Wellington region are looking at when it comes to this, which is, still advocating behind the mayors and giving them the support. Because I think in the new triennium, you might want to put something in the standing orders which delegates powers to this committee, but I don't think the mayors will actually give that to us. I think because they've been elected to be the voice of their retrospective communities, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't stand beside them when they have this corridor with the beehive, that we can actually ask to participate in that conversation if it is your your stream of work that you're quite comfortable with but also knowledgeable about. So that's how I think we as a committee can add value to those conversations. Yeah.
Having a rather loose discussion, do we want to move into debate? Okay, all right. Shall I just move the paper and just thank colleagues? That's while you shouldn't generally write a letter by committee, those were incredibly useful suggestions. So actually that's been a very efficient use of time, and it's quite exciting, I think, actually to be getting into this space. Right, Martin, haven't done any, so it's time to go to get involved, and definitely hope that the next committee will straight once it's appointed in November. Keep cracking on. Councillor Mitchell, will you second? Do you wish to speak? Does anyone want to speak? Martin? Okay, fantastic. Right, all those in favour? Aye. Any against? Ko mana. Excellent. All right. Can I just conclude before we go to the karakia? Look, I apologise that meeting was a little bit tense at times, but we are all here because we're all in the same place, and I love working with you, and I think we actually got to some good places today. It feels like things are ticking along, and I very much look forward to June, which of course is going to be a very, very busy month. We will be run off our feet, but big thanks to the staff again and to colleagues for just getting some good things done. Right, so if we go to the karakia. Sorry, what was it? Oh, right, okay. Unihia, ki te uru tapunui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatū, koe a rā e rongo, whakairia aki ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Thank you, team.